The galaxy was wide and full of stars, but not all stars brought warmth. Some hung in space like cold eyes, watching but never caring. On the edge of one quiet system, a small blue-green planet called Vesta 9 floated peacefully among the stars. It was home to a simple human colony. The people there were not rich or powerful. They were not soldiers or leaders. They were builders, scientists, farmers, and teachers. They worked hard, helped each other, and dreamed of a better life. They believed in peace. They believed the galaxy had room for everyone. But not everyone in the galaxy believed the same. Far away in a place where sunlight never touched, there was a strong and fearsome empire called the Zarnith. The Zarnith were tall, proud, and cold. Their armor shone like ice. Their voices were deep and without feeling. They ruled with strength. They controlled many systems, many planets, and many people. But no matter how big they were, the Zarnith were never satisfied. They always wanted more. More power, more fear, more control. When they saw that humans were growing, building colonies, sharing ideas, forming friendships, they grew uneasy. They thought humans were too loud, too kind, too different. To the Zarnith, kindness was weakness and freedom was a threat. So they began to watch the humans, especially the small colony on Vesta 9. It was quiet. It had no weapons. It looked like an easy target. One night, under a sky filled with stars, 10 humans were taken from their homes on Vesta 9. They did not do anything wrong. They had no warning. The Zarnith arrived without lights, without sound. Their ships moved like shadows. Their steps made no noise. In just 1 hour, 10 lives were stolen. They did not ask for names. They did not care who was taken. They simply chose. Among the 10 was a schoolteacher named Mara. She loved reading stories to children and baking pies for the town's winter festival. Another was a young man named Jalen who helped fix farming machines. One was an older woman who ran a small garden growing vegetables for people who couldn't pay. A fourth was a father who always wore a blue cap and told jokes while delivering mail. These were not soldiers. They were not dangerous. They were just people who tried to make their home better. The Zarnith took them anyway. No one saw them again. There was no trial, no warning, no reason. The people of Vesta 9 woke up to find doors open, chairs overturned, beds cold, and their friends missing. Panic spread fast. Mothers screamed. Children cried. Neighbors gathered asking questions, but no answers came. Then something even worse happened. A message was sent, not to Vesta 9 but across the Zarnith systems. It was short, cold, and cruel. It said, 10 humans have been judged. 10 humans are gone. Let this be a lesson to all who forget who rules this galaxy. The Zarnith did not hide their crime. They wore it like a medal. They believed they had won. They believed the humans would do nothing. After all, what could a small planet do against such a powerful empire? But the Zarnith did not understand humans. Not yet. News spread slowly at first, like a whisper on the wind. A traveler from Vesta 9 landed on another human colony and told the story to a friend. That friend told others. A mining ship picked up the message and sent it to a station near Earth. A group of traders heard the tale and passed it along through quiet channels. The words were carried not by warships or spies, but by voices. Real voices, angry voices, sad voices, brave voices. And Earth listened. When the message reached Earth, people stood still. Screens showed the names of the missing. Photos were shared. People looked into the eyes of those who were taken and felt their pain. They saw Mara smiling with a book in her hand. They saw Jalen working with grease on his face. They saw the father in his blue cap hugging his daughter. These were not just names. They were lives. They were loved. The world went quiet for a moment. Streets were still. Classrooms paused. Homes fell silent. No one could believe it. The Zarnith had crossed a line. Then came the pain. Candlelight vigils were held in every city. Flowers were left outside spaceports and embassies. Children drew pictures of stars with 10 bright lights. In churches, temples, and halls, people prayed for justice. But even as they cried, something began to change. The pain turned to fire. People were no longer just sad. They were angry. They were not loud. They were not violent, but they were firm. Earth did not rise with guns, it rose with hearts. People from all nations came together, not to destroy, but to decide. They asked one question: what now? The leaders of Earth met in secret. No news cameras were allowed. No reporters stood outside. The room was quiet, but the silence was full of power. Inside, men and women from every background sat together. Some had lost family. Some had known the missing personally. Others were simply tired of watching evil grow stronger while the good were taken. They knew one thing for sure. The Zarnith believed they had done something small, but it was not small. It was a spark, and that spark had found dry grass. Now a fire was coming. But this would not be a fire of war. It would be a fire of action, a fire of quiet strength. The humans did not want to become what they hated. They would not kill to make their point. They would not conquer to feel powerful. Instead, they would be smart. They would be fast. And most of all, they would be united. Across the galaxy, allies began to pay attention. Small groups from other planets started asking questions. Why did the Zarnith take them? What did those 10 humans do wrong? If they can take peaceful people, who will be next? Even old enemies of Earth paused to listen. Something was changing. On Vesta 9, the colony did not go back to normal. The school stayed closed. The gardens were quiet. The homes of the missing stood like shadows. But even in their sadness, the people were strong. They planted trees in the names of the 10. They painted murals on the walls. One showed the 10 holding hands, walking together into the stars. Another showed the Zarnith Empire cracked open, light pouring through the cracks. And far away, in a place even the Zarnith could not see, a ship was being prepared. It was not big, it had no weapons, but it was fast, and it was quiet. On the side of the ship, painted in small letters, were the words, "We do not forget." This ship was not the only one. In hidden places across moons and stations, humans were making moves. Not loud moves, not angry ones, but careful, smart ones. They were gathering facts, tracking patterns, learning how the Zarnith worked, where they sent their ships, how they stored their power, who controlled their networks. They weren't just mourning. They were preparing. The Zarnith didn't notice, or maybe they did and didn't care. They still believed humans were too small, too soft. They saw Earth's silence as weakness, but they didn't understand what that silence meant. Because sometimes, when humans go quiet, It means something is about to happen. And deep in space, something already had. Every person taken from Vesta 9 had a life. They had people who knew them, cared for them, missed them. They were not just names. They were not just faces on a screen. They were part of something bigger: families, friendships, communities, dreams. When the Zarnath thought they had erased 10 humans, they forgot something important. No one is ever truly alone. When one person disappears, 100 hearts feel it. The first name to reach Earth's central network was Mara Eloin, the teacher. Her sister, Dr. Lisa Eloin, worked as a top scientist at the Orbital Research Center near Mars. Lisa was not only a skilled researcher, she had helped design solar shields for space farming. Her mind was sharp, her work respected across multiple systems. But more than her career, she was a sister. When she heard what happened, she left her lab without a word. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't post messages. She simply began working on something new. Quietly, focused, purposeful. Mara was more than just a sister. In the school on Vesta 9, children remembered how she used to sing while cleaning the blackboard. She always had extra pencils. She never let any child feel forgotten. She believed every student could grow if someone gave them a little light. Her loss felt like a light going out, but in the hearts of those she taught, that light still burned. Then came the news about Jalen Voss, the young mechanic. He had grown up fixing broken machines in the farming fields. He had dirt under his nails and oil on his clothes, but he always had a smile. His best friend, Captain Theo Bran, served aboard a trade defense cruiser called Silver Whisper. Theo and Jalen grew up on the same asteroid station, learning how to build engines out of scrap. When Theo joined the fleet, Jalen stayed back to help colonists. Theo always said, "Jalen has more heart than 10 soldiers." When Theo heard the Zarnath had taken Jalen, he didn't shout or cry. He simply sat alone in the engine room of his ship, holding a photo. Then he got up, walked to the command center, and rerouted the ship's path. No one questioned it. The crew followed. They had seen Theo angry before, but never like this. Quiet anger can be more dangerous than loud rage. Quiet anger remembers every detail. One of the older victims, Luma Dren, was well known on Vesta 9 for her kindness. She wasn't rich or famous. She didn't run a big company or fly ships, but her home was always open. She gave away seeds to grow food. She helped people fix their roofs after storms. She knew every neighbor's name. Her only child, Errol Dren, lived on Earth as a data systems developer. Errol didn't have military skills, but he had something else: access. He worked for the Galactic Communications Network. He could trace signals, reroute data, and find hidden messages in noise. He was quiet, calm, careful. But when he saw his mother's name on the missing list, he stopped answering his supervisor. He started digging. By the end of that week, Errol had discovered 3 hidden signal points used by Zarnath ships. He didn't send the findings to any government. He sent them to Mara's sister, Lisa. One message, no signature, just 3 coordinates and the words, "They took my mother." The next name was Galen Moore, the man with the blue cap. Galen was not important to the galaxy, but to his daughter Vea he was the whole world. Vea was a translator for interplanetary councils. She could speak 5 languages fluently. She had helped settle trade talks and border peace deals. She believed in understanding, not fighting. But when she learned her father was gone, something in her changed. She stopped attending meetings. She deleted all her translation files. She packed a small bag and left Earth quietly. No one knew where she went at first. Then a rumor spread. A Zarnith diplomat's ship lost power mid-flight. The systems failed, but no warning was sent. Later, people whispered that the ship had been studied from the inside. Not damaged, just studied. It moved again after 4 hours, but something had changed. Files were missing. Codes were copied. No one claimed responsibility, but people who knew Vea said, "She's not done." Another victim was Darren Hollow, a quiet gardener who grew rare flowers in Vesta 9 soil domes. His partner, Illa, lived in a science vessel orbiting Europa. Illa was a plant biologist who once discovered a new species of water root. She was calm, kind, and never raised her voice. But when she found out Darren had been taken, she sealed her lab. A few days later, her research ship changed its mission from study to transport. No one knew what it carried. But those who had seen Illa's eyes said they had never looked so cold. The Zarnith believed they had taken nobodies, but each of these humans had someone powerful who loved them, someone who had tools, knowledge, access, skills. These were not just 10 humans. They were 10 centers of 10 webs, webs that stretched across space and time. Even strangers joined. A small music group from Neptune released a song called 10 Stars Missing. It went viral in hours. Teenagers from 3 colonies painted murals with the words, "We remember." Pilots began changing their call signs to include numbers matching the victims. Ships quietly posted symbols on their sides, 10 stars, arranged in a circle. And there was one more name the Zarnith didn't count on: Princess Aralai of Jara. Jara was a peaceful planet that often stayed away from galactic matters. But Princess Aralai had visited Earth once, just once. During her studies at a star diplomacy school, she had stayed in a guest home run by none other than Luma Dren, the older woman with the garden. Back then, Aralai had been nervous and homesick. She had trouble with Earth food, Earth customs, and Earth sleep patterns. But Luma had cared for her like a granddaughter. She gave her warm soup, soft pillows, and late-night stories. Aralai had never forgotten. When she saw Luma's name among the 10, she froze. Her advisors told her to stay silent. They said, "It is not our planet's issue." But Aralai did not listen. She made a private request to her guards. "If I ever leave this palace again," she said, "I will only travel aboard a human ship." That message was intercepted by humans. They were shocked. Why would a royal from another world reject her own ships, her own safety, just to ride with humans? Aralai answered through a simple message: "Because your people remember, and I remember you." Her message was shared over 100 million times in a single day. Suddenly, Earth was not just mourning, it was being respected. All 10 people taken by the Zarnith had been connected to people who mattered, not because they were famous, but because they were loved. Their stories touched hearts. Their loss woke up minds. Even in the farthest systems, people began asking questions. Small shops put candles in their windows. Navigation beacons on quiet moons began to flash the 10-star symbol. Deep space miners carved the names of the missing into metal walls. A tattoo artist on Saturn offered 10-pointed stars for free. People wanted to remember. People wanted to honor. People wanted justice. The Zarnath didn't understand this. They thought strength came from fear. They thought pain silenced people. But they had done something no empire should ever do. They had hurt people who were loved by those with reach, voice, and determination. And now the web was moving. Hackers worked silently in bunkers beneath Mars, building codes no firewall could block. Cargo ships from human worlds began changing their flight patterns, no longer visiting Zarnath stations. Medical teams refused to treat injured Zarnath travelers unless they gave information. Pilots who used to avoid conflict zones started flying closer to Zarnath space, not with weapons, but with eyes wide open. The galaxy had not declared war, but something else had started. Humans were remembering. And in that remembering, something stronger than rage was rising. Not revenge, not violence, but purpose. 10 people had been taken, but each of them had left behind a ripple, and those ripples were turning into waves. The Zarnath had tried to erase 10 lives, but in doing so, they had drawn the attention of a species that never forgot its own. It began slowly, without a single gun being fired. There were no explosions, no loud warnings, and no famous speeches. The universe did not shake, but something quiet started to move. It was small, cold, and very serious. It started when a patrol ship belonging to the Zarnath Empire vanished without a trace. The ship had flown that route near Earth hundreds of times. It carried supplies and was guarded by experienced pilots. But one day, it simply stopped answering. The location signal blinked once. Then it was gone. Zarnath officials searched nearby systems but found nothing. No debris, no distress signal, and no clue. They told the public that it was probably a technical error, but in their hearts, they felt something strange had happened. Soon after that, a mining station located near Jupiter suddenly shut down. The station was one of the largest in the area, known for pulling valuable minerals from deep within the planet's orbit. It did not explode. It was not attacked, but the machine stopped spinning. The lights went dark. The control panels froze, and no one could reach it. When Zarnath engineers finally arrived, they found every piece of equipment perfectly safe but completely frozen. The air was cold. The wires were clean. And on a single screen in the control room, someone had drawn a small circle of 10 stars. The Zarnath still did not panic. They believed it was a coincidence. They told themselves it was nothing. But then it kept happening. A supply ship heading toward Varnos 4 lost all contact and never arrived. Satellites near Mars showed strange errors in their data. A communications tower on a distant moon lost power, only for it to return minutes later with all messages replaced by one phrase: 10 gone, 10 remembered. These signs appeared again and again, always simple, always quiet, always careful. At first, the Zarnath Empire thought it was a trick. Perhaps someone was playing a game. Perhaps it was a glitch in their system. But as the number of these events grew, the pattern became clear. These were not random problems. These were not accidents. Someone was behind them, and that someone was not asking for attention. They were sending a message, not with weapons, but with silence. The strange part was that no human government claimed responsibility. Earth said nothing. No soldiers appeared. No famous faces made threats. But the systems continued to break. The patrols became nervous, and the traders began to speak in whispers. People who once feared the Zarnith now looked at them with quiet smiles. On trading ships, engineers wore pins with 10 small stars. On planets across the galaxy, graffiti began appearing on spaceport walls. It was not loud, just a circle of 10 stars. No names, no blame, but it said everything. Across the galaxy, Zarnith leaders noticed something unusual. Human cargo ships seemed to avoid conflict, but still managed to move faster and smoother than Zarnith transports. Human data packets traveled quicker. Their machines worked cleaner. It was almost like they were one step ahead in everything. And still, not one word was spoken. This new type of revenge had no face. It had no army. It came with broken drones, disabled ships, and security codes that no longer worked. Sometimes entire Zarnith depots would find their supplies missing without damage or noise. The doors were still locked, but the storage rooms were empty. Sometimes a message was left behind. "You hurt 10. We remember." But even then, the humans did not kill. They did not bomb. They did not destroy. They simply removed what the enemy once used to control others. They did not fight with fire. They fought with memory, with technology, with patience. The Zarnith began to investigate deeply. Secret meetings were held in their most secure war rooms. Generals and scientists reviewed old security footage. They rechecked logs from every missing or frozen station. But there was never any footage of attackers. No images of breaking. No sign of force. It was like the shadows had come alive. On Earth, families who had lost loved ones remained silent. But behind closed doors, small movements began. Friends of the 10 humans began using their skills. Some of them were pilots, some were scientists, others were hackers. They did not organize like an army. They did not wear the same uniform, but they knew what had to be done. One by one, they began to work. A pilot known for carrying goods started delivering empty boxes, except for one small paper with 10 stars. A data scientist began editing maps in Zarnith systems, making their travel paths longer by just a few minutes. A mechanic working on space engines changed the calibration slightly so that every Zarnith ship used more fuel than needed. None of these actions caused pain, but they made life harder for the enemy. People who had never held weapons started changing the balance of power. Farmers redirected food supplies away from Zarnith-controlled space. Miners refused to sell fuel to their ships. Communication towers dropped their signal whenever a Zarnith code appeared. No one said they were part of a rebellion, but the small acts added up. It was slow, it was steady, and it was impossible to stop. The Zarnith called these acts technical failures. They told their citizens that the empire was still strong, but deep inside their systems were breaking, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. One day, a large Zarnith spaceport reported that all of its ships had been locked down. The command center could not open the launch gates. Pilots could not control their engines. For exactly 10 minutes, every ship on the platform stood frozen. Then, just as quickly, all systems came back. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was touched. But every ship had a message blinking on its dashboard. "We remember." The Empire tried to erase the message, but someone had already posted it on the galactic network. People everywhere saw it. They didn't cheer. They didn't shout, but they knew what it meant. It meant someone had finally stood up. The strange thing was that this movement had no leader, no name. It spread like a wind, carried by those who felt the pain of the 10 lost. Even aliens from other systems began to take part. A merchant from the Alari zone stopped selling weapons to the Zarnith. A robot trader from the Chiron sector gave away energy cells to humans but doubled the price for Zarnith buyers. A traveling artist painted murals of 10 stars on the sides of spaceports. No one told them to. They just did it. The Zarnith tried to threaten them. They warned businesses and closed down trade routes. But the more they pushed, the more resistance grew, and the 10 stars kept appearing, on doors, on crates, on screens, in dreams. At first, the Zarnith Empire didn't believe anything serious was happening. Their commanders laughed in meetings. They told each other that humans were too emotional to organize a plan. They believed Earth was weak. They thought the strange problems were just technical glitches or lazy workers. But as the quiet actions continued, something began to shift. One leader in the Zarnith Empire, Grand Strategist Yulvok, started to notice things that others missed. He studied every report. He stayed awake through long nights reading logs from ships, stations, and satellites. Slowly, a pattern came into view. These problems weren't just happening in one area. They were happening everywhere. On moons, stations, trade routes, and even deep inside Zarnith territory. He marked each report on a star map and stared at the glowing dots. Each red light was a problem, a missing ship, a failed mission, a silent satellite, a frozen computer. There were dozens of them. Some were tiny, some were huge, but none of them were random. He printed the map and placed it on the wall of his private office. Then he circled the 10 original names, the 10 humans the Empire had executed. He didn't want to believe they were connected, but the signs were too clear. Each new problem had happened near someone who once worked with those 10. Each breakdown happened near a system they had touched. Friends, co-workers, teachers, partners, each of them had ties to the 10 who had died. The Empire had not just removed 10 lives. It had disturbed a whole web of people connected through memory, love, and loyalty. Yulvok didn't tell the Emperor right away. He first called for a small meeting with other military minds. They reviewed data together and quietly admitted that something strange was going on. This wasn't a war, but it was beginning to feel like one. Not loud, not open, but deadly in a different way. Unlike other enemies, the humans were not attacking from the front. They were attacking from the shadows. And yet there were no explosions. There were no direct battles, but trade was slowing. Communications were breaking. Machines were failing, all without clear reasons. The other Zarnith leaders still thought it was beneath them to take humans seriously. Earthlings are too emotional to plan, they said. They are just angry and loud. But Yulvok was not so sure. He had studied human history. He knew how Earth had once been divided but had united when needed. He remembered reading about how Earth fought silently in the past, not just with weapons, but with strategy, with patience, with deep thinking. He began to worry. As more problems appeared, Yulvok started sending secret teams to Earth-connected systems. These teams weren't soldiers. They were analysts and spies. Their mission was to watch, listen, and learn, but they had little success. Every time they tried to track who was behind the damage, they found nothing. No prints, no signals, no open messages. Whoever was behind it had learned how to move like air, always there but never seen. That made Yulvok even more uneasy. He ordered a report on Earth's current technology. The report came back with a shocking update. Humans had been improving their tools quickly. While the Zarnith had spent years building stronger weapons, humans had been perfecting something else: information. Earth had built faster networks, smarter satellites, smaller machines that worked quietly and did big things. Humans had stopped focusing on big, scary ships and started focusing on fast, smart systems. It was clear now, humans weren't just angry, they were prepared. The report also mentioned something else. Most of the people helping Earth's systems now weren't in government. They were regular people: scientists, workers, students, and coders. They didn't wear uniforms, but they worked like one giant mind. A mind that remembered the 10 who were taken. A mind that did not forgive. That idea scared Yulvok more than bombs ever could. He returned to his map and saw it with new eyes. Each red dot was not a mistake, it was a choice, a message. The Empire had made a move, and now humans were answering, not with hate but with purpose. On one mining moon, Zarnith drones began spinning in circles, unable to follow orders. On another station, the temperature sensors stopped working and had to be replaced, costing days of delay. A cargo ship found that its navigation system had flipped the north and south poles, sending it drifting for hours before someone caught the error. These were not accidents. Someone had rewritten the code. Someone had hacked the systems. But no alarms went off. No fingerprints were left. It was as if Earth had turned into a ghost. The grand strategist ordered his advisors to test the Empire's most private systems. Even those showed signs of quiet entry. Codes had been slightly changed. Backup plans had been disturbed. Cameras had been turned off just for a few seconds at a time every few days. It was small, very small, but it meant one thing: someone had already been inside their walls. The Empire had always been proud of its control, but now it was losing control without even knowing how. Other generals began to notice the drop in speed. Trade routes became slower. Complaints started growing. Zarnith merchants said their engines needed more fuel. Their robots made mistakes. Their deliveries were late. Everyone was growing frustrated. When asked for reasons, engineers shrugged. Everything is built right, they said. It's the systems. They're just not working like before. They didn't know that Earth was already under their skin. Yulvok decided to test a theory. He sent one message to Earth's trade alliance, pretending to offer peace talks. The response he got was cold but polite. There were no insults, no threats, just a small packet of code attached to the reply. When Yulvok opened the file, all it did was show him a blank screen. Then 10 stars appeared. Then it vanished. The message was clear: we are watching. For the first time in years, Yulvok felt a chill down his spine. He looked out the window of his ship, watching the stars blink in the distance. Somewhere out there, people who once loved the 10 executed humans were working in silence. They had no uniforms, but they were soldiers. They had no guns, but they had power. And worst of all for the Empire, they had time. That was the most dangerous part. The humans weren't rushing. They weren't trying to win fast. They were patient. They were calm. They were focused. This was not revenge for them, it was memory. The Zarnith had always believed humans were weak because they were emotional. But now those emotions had become weapons. A mother's grief, a friend's heartbreak, a child's memory, all of it had been turned into action. And no army in the universe could fight that. The Empire tried to stop the story from spreading. They told news stations to block stories about missing ships and failed systems. But people talked anyway. In cafes, on transport hubs, in back rooms, the truth was shared. Even among Zarnith citizens, the stories began to grow, and with them a strange respect for Earth began to rise. People were impressed by how the humans had not shouted or bragged. They simply acted, quiet, sharp, effective. Now, Yulvok had to admit what others still refused to see. This was not random. This was not chaos. This was a plan. And worse, it was working. He sent a private message to the Emperor. In it, he included his full report. At the end of the message, he wrote, "The humans are not seeking war, but they are not standing still. We must prepare for a long battle of minds, not missiles. We have hurt them, and now they move with memory. We should not underestimate them again." For the first time, the Zarnith Empire had begun to worry. Not because Earth was strong, but because Earth was quiet and still winning. Back on Earth, something quiet and serious was taking place. There were no reporters, no cameras, no big speeches. The world had gone calm on the surface, but underneath it was preparing for something important. People were not shouting. They were not crying. They were planning, and they were planning in secret. In different cities around the world, leaders met in hidden places. They didn't wear bright clothes or symbols. They wore plain suits, old uniforms, or no uniforms at all. Some came from government offices. Some came from research centers. Others were workers who used to build ships or teach young minds. A few were soldiers, but most were not. These people had something in common. They had lost someone. Each one of them remembered the 10 humans who were taken by the Zarnith Empire. They were not just names. They were friends, sisters, sons, teammates, partners. Every person in the room had a face in their heart, a smile they would never see again, a voice that would never speak again. And they knew this was not just a mistake. It was not an accident. It was a message from the Empire, a message of power. But Earth was going to send its own message. These leaders knew they could not fight the Empire with big ships or loud weapons. That would bring too much pain, too much death. So they decided to fight in a different way. Not with rockets, not with bombs, but with something even stronger: knowledge, speed, and silence. In the largest meeting room under a mountain base, the walls were covered with maps. Star charts showed where the Zarnith Empire moved. Diagrams showed how their ships worked. Reports showed what had failed over the past month. One wall held a timeline of every quiet attack the humans had already made. No one in the room smiled. They simply studied, pointed, and made plans. They decided to split into teams. Each team would handle a special part of the plan. One group focused on machines, how to control them without being noticed. Another group focused on money, how to break the empire's trade and digital systems. A third team worked on information, how to move messages without being tracked. And the last group worked on timing, when and where to act so it would make the biggest impact. These teams didn't work from one place. They were spread across Earth and beyond. Some worked in labs, others hid in space stations or moved between planets. They used code names, secret signals, and invisible files. They built new software and tested it in the middle of the night. They trained small devices to sneak into systems and change tiny details, just enough to cause problems without being found. Each group had its own small leader. These leaders had no medals, no fans, and no fame, but they were brave, and they were smart. One woman, known only as Sparrow, used to fix farming tools in her small town. Now she was designing systems that could stop a whole mining station. Another man, called Wisp, had once worked on cargo ships. Now he was helping disable transport engines using signal tricks. Everyone had a role. Every role mattered. No one acted alone. The humans knew they were smaller than the Empire. They knew their enemies had more ships, more weapons, and more soldiers. But Earth had something stronger: purpose. The pain of losing the 10 had turned into something clear and sharp. Not hate, not rage, but focus. The plan was not to destroy the Empire. That would take too much and hurt too many. The goal was to make the Empire stop, to slow them down, to show them they could not do what they wanted and walk away untouched. Earth wanted to make them feel what it was like to lose control. So the humans began testing their work in small ways. They sent tiny signals to faraway trade ships. These signals confused the navigation systems, making the ships take the wrong turn or stop early. Then they sent fake orders to Zarnith computers, making them load the wrong cargo or send supplies to the wrong planet. At first, it looked like mistakes, but as it kept happening, the Empire began to notice. Meanwhile, the humans worked on another part of the plan, learning. They watched, they listened. They collected every bit of data they could. They studied the Empire's habits, how they traded, when they rested, what they feared. They found holes in the Empire's walls and moved through them not to hurt but to learn more. And they never made a sound. One young team in South America created a virus, not a sickness for the body but for machines. It was built to enter Zarnith networks and sit quietly like a sleeping animal. It didn't do anything at first. It just waited. Then when it was time, it would wake up and change everything at once, shut down doors, flip power levels, or switch control from the Empire to Earth's side. They tested it on their own systems over and over, making sure it could not be traced, and it worked. The virus had no name, only a symbol, a single tear. It stood for the 10 who were lost and for every human who cried for them. But it was not built from sadness. It was built from love, a love that would protect the rest of Earth from harm. Back on the moon, another secret base was preparing drones. Not big fighting machines, but small helpers. These drones looked like space dust, but they were smart. They could land on enemy ships, connect to their wires, and listen. Some could even send tiny shocks to confuse the controls. These were not made to destroy, just to slow, to weaken, to remind. Even Earth space farmers joined the effort. They used their knowledge of satellites and weather machines to block Zarnith signals. Without signal, the Empire's ships got confused. Orders were lost. Plans were delayed. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. On every continent, people helped in different ways. A teacher in India gave lessons to young coders who joined the plan later. A grandmother in Kenya remembered old messages she once heard from a Zarnith trader and shared them with a translator. A child in Canada noticed a strange signal on his radio and recorded it. That signal turned out to be a key piece of the enemy's code. No one was too small. Everyone was needed. And everyone remembered why they were doing it. At one point, a team in Australia found something surprising. The Empire used the same passwords across hundreds of systems. This was a gift. Earth used that weakness to create backdoors into the Empire's deepest files. They now had access to maps, plans, and the location of secret bases. This changed everything. With this knowledge, Earth's teams could pick their next targets carefully, places that would make the biggest difference with the smallest noise. Back in the mountain meeting room, the Earth leaders marked their next moves. Red pins showed where the Zarnith would feel pain. Blue pins showed where Earth could stay safe. Each pin came with a plan, and each plan came with a person ready to act. No one was forced. Everyone volunteered. Then came the hardest part, waiting. Earth's secret plan was not about speed. It was about timing. Everything had to happen in the right order. If they moved too soon, the Empire would crush them. If they moved too late, more people could be lost. So they waited, like the deep ocean before a wave. While they waited, they practiced. They ran drills. They tested systems. They built backups and made sure everyone knew what to do. This was not just a fight for today. It was a promise for the future. They also trained others, not just on Earth but across the galaxy. Humans living on other planets were taught how to stay hidden, how to help, and how to protect themselves. Soon, a quiet network stretched from Earth to Mars to distant colonies. It was a web of minds and hearts, tied together by memory and hope. All of this was built without noise. There were no signs, no banners, no bright lights, just quiet footsteps, quiet minds, quiet hands doing powerful things. And at the center of it all, the 10 who had been taken were not forgotten. Their pictures stayed on the walls. Their names were whispered in each meeting. Every time a drone launched, or a virus was sent, or a signal was changed, it was done in their honor. Their story had not ended. It had become a beginning. When the time was right, the Earth leaders sent a single signal, a quiet message to every team. One word, now. And the plan, built from silence and sorrow, began to move like a storm in the stars. The message had been sent, now, and with that one word everything began. The sky above Earth stayed peaceful. People on the surface still walked to school, worked their jobs, and planted in the soil. But far beyond the blue sky, in the deep space where stars shine like cold fire, something powerful was moving, quiet, calm, and unstoppable. The plan that Earth had prepared was not loud. It was not made to destroy everything. It was made to be smart. It was made to make the enemy feel small. And now it was time. In the darkness of space, Near the outer edges of the Zarnith Empire, the first targets were reached. These were not big ships or battle stations. They were control hubs, supply points, and communication towers. They were the tiny bones of the empire, the things that held it together. Humans had learned that breaking small pieces could hurt more than smashing large ones. One of the first actions took place near a moon that circled a frozen gas giant. A group of human-controlled drones, shaped like tiny stars, floated close to the Empire's data tower. The tower controlled travel routes across 10 nearby systems. The drones waited for the tower to send its signal. When it did, the drones replied with their own. It was a fake, but so perfect that even the Empire's system believed it. And with that signal, the tower began to reroute ships in the wrong direction. Suddenly, ships meant to carry food were heading to mining planets that didn't eat. Fuel ships turned around and landed at stations that were already full. Nothing exploded. No one screamed. But the chaos began. Food was late. Fuel was missing. People were confused, and no one knew why. Back on Earth, the team that launched the signal didn't cheer. They just checked their work and sent out the next task. They had more to do. Another attack came from a far-off asteroid base. It looked like a rock to everyone, but inside it held a team of tech experts and space engineers. They had one job: take control of enemy outposts without being seen, and they did. They sent a silent wave of code through the Empire's defense satellites. The satellites shut down one after another. No lights, no beeps. They just went dark. These machines didn't fall or break. They simply stopped working. Now the enemy's outer border was open. They couldn't see what was coming. Next, Earth special drones built to move like space dust began their second mission. They attached themselves to Empire freighters, not to explode, not to damage, but to listen. These drones heard everything: orders, flight paths, and secret messages. They sent it all back to Earth, where teams read and understood it all. Now humans knew what the Empire would do before they even did it. With this knowledge, the humans planned even better attacks. One group of pilots, using stolen Empire uniforms and copied badges, flew into a docking station. They acted like normal workers. No one noticed. But while there, they changed a few wires, adjusted a few ports, and left behind a quiet surprise. Hours later, the station system began to act strange. Doors would not open. Lights flickered. Power dropped. The workers thought it was bad luck, but it was. It was Earth. All over the Empire's space, strange things began to happen. Ships circled without purpose. Schedules were missed. Messages were lost. Machines stopped and restarted again and again. The Empire blamed its own people. They thought someone was lazy or someone had made mistakes, but this was no accident. Earth was sending a message without words. We are here, we are close, and we are smarter than you thought. In some areas, human teams didn't need machines. They used only their minds. A group of planners working from a hidden moon base used old trade data to guess where the Empire would move next. They noticed a pattern. Every 3 weeks, a supply ship visited a group of factories on the edge of the Empire's space. If that ship didn't arrive, the factories would stop. So the team found a way to cancel the ship's signal. It never arrived, and the factories went silent. This small action caused a chain reaction. Without parts from those factories, the Empire couldn't fix broken machines. Without machines, workers had to wait. Projects slowed. Plans failed. One simple delay had spread across 6 systems, all from one team, one idea. And still, no one had fired a shot. Even though Earth was winning small battles, they didn't celebrate. They knew this was only the beginning. The Empire still had power, still had weapons, still had pride. But slowly, that pride was turning to fear. On one of the inner planets of the Empire, something strange began to happen. A city that had always followed the Empire's rules suddenly had power problems. The lights would blink, then fade. Water pumps stopped for minutes at a time. At first, the leaders thought it was just bad weather, but there was no weather in their domed city. Then they blamed the workers, then the builders, but they were wrong. It was a virus, Earth's virus, the one built by the young coders in South America. It had reached deep inside the Empire's systems and started to flip tiny switches. The people of that city started to ask questions. Why is this happening? Why can't the Empire fix it? Are we safe? These questions scared the Empire more than any weapon, because questions bring doubt, and doubt is stronger than fire. On a quiet station floating near a red sun, another surprise came. This station held one of the Empire's most important leaders. He thought he was safe. His walls were strong. His guards were loyal. But one night while he was asleep, all the screens in his room lit up. A simple symbol appeared, a tear. He sat up and stared. Then the screens went dark again. No one had broken in. No one had touched him, but the message was clear. We can reach you even here. From that day on, he never felt safe again. In the next week, more things broke. A cargo route stopped working. A food center gave out spoiled meals. A mining station dropped a full load of metal into space because the sensors lied. People began to whisper, Earth is doing this. At first, they were laughed at. But when it kept happening, more and more began to believe. Some members of the Empire's army grew nervous. They weren't scared of humans before. But now these humans weren't acting like they used to. They were smart. They were patient. They were changing the rules. And the Empire didn't know how to stop it. One commander tried to send ships to Earth, but when the ships passed through a gate, they came out on the wrong side of the galaxy. Earth had changed the map data. The commander yelled, blamed his team, and ordered a new attack. But by the time they corrected the maps, Earth had already moved again. Nothing could be trusted anymore, and that was the true weapon, doubt. In schools across the Empire, lessons about Earth began to change. Before, Earth was called weak, small, and unimportant. But now teachers were told not to speak of Earth at all. The children asked, why not? And the silence made them curious. Curiosity is dangerous to those who want control. On Earth, the leaders watched all of this without smiling. They were not doing this to become kings. They were not doing this to rule. They were doing this to protect, to remind the galaxy that Earth might be quiet, but it is not helpless. It might be small, but it is not broken. And it remembers. Every human who had worked on the plan remembered the 10 who were taken. Their faces were on screens. Their names were whispered in code messages. Every success, every quiet attack, every broken system, each one was done in their name. And this was only the beginning. The enemy had more to lose. And Earth was not finished yet.